It was early morning when the quiet cafe on the corner of the square froze in place. 3 sleek black SUVs had just pulled up outside. Their engines died in unison, but the tension they carried was still humming in the air. People inside paused mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Something about the way the doors opened, precise, rehearsed, told everyone this was not ordinary. Uniformed men stepped out, forming a line before the entrance. Then one of them, a man with a solemn gaze and medals gleaming under his coat, walked through the door. He didn't look around. He simply asked, "We're looking for a woman named Sarah." Behind the counter, a woman stood still, her hand wrapped around a glass coffee pot. Her faded apron bore the imprint of 1,000 quiet mornings. She looked up, eyes uncertain. "That's me," she said quietly. The officer stepped closer and handed her a sealed envelope. "This is about the boy." And just like that, the cafe fell into silence again. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. But this wasn't where the story began. Let's go back to understand what really happened. Months earlier, in that same cafe, life moved with quiet repetition. Sarah, 32, worked the opening shift. She walked to the diner each day before the sun rose, tied on her old apron with a hand-stitched daisy, and prepared the same batch of coffee for the same familiar faces. She didn't speak much about herself. Few knew she lived alone in a small upstairs room not far from the cafe. Even fewer knew about the shoebox under her bed, where she kept a worn photograph of her father in military uniform and a journal he had left behind. Her days were predictable, safe, ordinary. Until one Tuesday morning, a boy appeared. He looked about 10, maybe younger. He had quiet, observant eyes and a backpack that seemed far too heavy for his thin frame. Without a word, he chose the last table in the corner by the window and asked only for a glass of water. The next morning, he came again. Same seat, same silence. The third day, too. Sarah noticed he never ate. He sat and watched others as they devoured toast and scrambled eggs. There was hunger in his eyes, sharp and raw, but he never asked for food. On the 4th day, she brought him 2 slices of toast and a boiled egg. The kitchen made too much, she told him with a light smile. Would be ashamed to throw it out. He looked at the plate, then at her. Without a word, he began to eat. Quickly, quietly. The ritual repeated itself in the days that followed. Sarah would bring a small meal, always pretending it was leftover, always walking away before he could protest. But not everyone was so kind. Customers began to whisper. One asked if Sarah knew where the boy's parents were. Another warned her not to encourage strays. Even Marcio, the cafe manager, pulled her aside one morning, frowning. "You can't keep giving away food like this," he said. "We're a business, not a charity." "I'll pay for it myself," Sarah replied calmly. "Your tips barely cover your rent." She shrugged. "Still, it's my choice." That night, Sarah sat alone at her small kitchen table and opened the journal her father had carried during his military service. On one of the pages, in faded ink, he had written, "Shared half my ration with a boy today. Johnson said I was crazy. Maybe. But that boy looked at food the way I used to, like it might disappear. No one grows poorer by sharing bread. But those who forget how to share remain hungry their whole lives." Sarah closed the journal slowly. Her hands trembled, but her resolve did not. The next morning, the boy was back. This time, he looked her in the eye and gave the smallest of nods before eating. He never said his name. She never asked. And yet something silent and unspoken passed between them each morning. But people notice things in small towns. And people talk. A photo was posted online, an empty plate at an empty table, with the caption, "Prasa Cafe now feeding imaginary friends?" The comments were harsh. Some called her naive. Others warned she'd regret it. Then one morning, the boy didn't show up. She waited. 15 minutes, 30, an hour. The plate remained untouched. The next day, still no sign. Nor the day after that. Back to the present. 3 sleek black SUVs had just pulled up outside. Their engines died in unison, but the tension they carried was still humming in the air. People inside paused mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Something about the way the doors opened, precise, rehearsed, told everyone this was not ordinary. Uniformed men stepped out, forming a line before the entrance. Then, one of them, a man with a solemn gaze and medals gleaming under his coat, walked through the door. He didn't look around. He simply asked, "We're looking for a woman named Sarah." Behind the counter, a woman stood still, her hand wrapped around a glass coffee pot. Her faded apron bore the imprint of 1,000 quiet mornings. She looked up, eyes uncertain. "That's me," she said quietly. The officer at the counter gently pressed the envelope into Sarah's hand. The room was still. She could feel every eye on her. He spoke softly. His name was Miguel. He came here every morning while his father was away on a mission. His mother had left. No one knew. He was alone. And he never told anyone, because he was afraid. Afraid that if people found out, he'd be taken from his home. He survived with what little his father had left behind. He came here because this was the one place he felt safe. Sarah couldn't breathe. The officer continued. Captain David Torres, Miguel's father, didn't know any of this when he deployed. But before he died, he left instructions. If something happened to him, we were to find the woman his son called the Cafe Lady. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was steady, but filled with urgency. If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. But if you find the woman who fed my son without judgment, thank her. She didn't just feed a hungry child. She preserved his dignity. And she gave me peace. The officer stepped back and saluted. Then every uniformed man outside did the same. Inside the cafe, not a single person spoke. Some stood. Others bowed their heads. And Sarah, silent, shaking, held the letter to her chest like something sacred. In the days that followed, everything changed. Marcio hung a new plaque above the corner table. It read, "For anyone who's hungry, for food or for kindness, no questions asked." Word spread. Struggling families began to visit. Veterans stopped in for coffee and left quietly, sometimes placing patches or coins on the counter. One morning, Sarah arrived to find a military challenge coin resting beside her order pad. On one side was the insignia of the Special Forces. On the other, a message etched in fine letters. For those who fight without a uniform. Captain David Torres. Weeks later, a school group came in for lunch. One little girl looked up at Sarah and asked, "Are you the lady from the letter?" Sarah knelt beside her and nodded. "I just made sure a boy didn't go hungry," she said gently. "He was the brave one." The girl smiled. "My dad says you're a hero." Sarah smiled back, eyes full. Sometimes being a hero is just noticing someone's hunger and not turning away. That winter, the cafe hosted a fundraiser for children of fallen soldiers. The turnout was bigger than anyone expected. Marcio matched the donations from his own pocket. The corner table was never empty again. And Sarah, quiet, steady Sarah, kept showing up every day, because hunger, she knew, wasn't always about food.